Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. As I mentioned in the previous episode, this is going to be the prepper episode focusing on water. And in the event that I haven't mentioned it or you're not familiar with it, there's sort of this thing called the rule of threes, which goes you can live 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and sometimes people tack on 3 months without hope. Sometimes people even say 3 seconds without hope and all that. I'm not going to talk about that, even though I do think morale is very important. It's just it's a little too abstract, in my opinion. Additionally, people are often surprised by the shelter one. I'll get more into that in the subsequent episode, but we're going to focus on the 3 days without water. That 72 hours is about how long a person who was previously hydrated can go without any kind of hydration, which, by the way, hydration can come from food, but before they succumb to dehydration. And that is in ideal circumstances. That's not including being in hot weather and perspiring or being very active and perspiring. Water is a lot more important than a lot of people realize. In fact, a common problem among hikers is they actually will expend a lot more water being active than they realize, and then they will, because water is very important for your intestines to just move solid waste, what happens is the feces in their guts get impacted and they get like dangerously constipated. And I know that sounds comical, but I'm talking to a degree where like emergency professionals or even park rangers, from what I've heard, get called in and have to like forcibly extract things from their guts. So, bottom line, these are circumstances where people are just in nature for recreational purposes. So imagine a scenario where you don't have potable water, because it's everywhere for us right now. In a developed country, you go to the tap, you pull or push or whatever, and water comes out, and you just inherently know this is clean water. You might filter it through a Brita pitcher or something like that, but you know that it's safe, generally speaking, as long as you don't like shove it up your nose or something. But imagine a circumstance, and a lot of natural disasters can lead to this, where you don't have potable water, like kind of a boil water advisory scenario. Or even worse, imagine a circumstance happens where you go to the tap and nothing's coming out. So how do you acquire potable water? Well, there are a few things that I think would be very invaluable skills. The first is, if you do have land and you have thought ahead enough to where you kind of have like a homestead going on, you could look for groundwater and dig a well. That's actually a great way to ensure that you constantly have water, and you do need to test it and make sure there's no trace amounts of heavy metals or anything that's going to mess you up. That being said, that's not an option for everybody. And here's another hypothetical. Let's say you've thought ahead and you've got a homestead, all that. One thing you can actually do, you can sort of create kind of an artificial well. You could actually store water in a big concrete cistern. And if you dig it in at the right angle, this concrete cistern, you could actually have it to where groundwater leaches through multiple layers of soil. And in short, you're really creating kind of an artificial spring using this cistern. Some people I've even heard use septic tanks to do this. Obviously not used septic tanks, just big tanks that normally... I swore I wasn't going to forget to mute my phone last time, and I went ahead and forgot. Sorry, everybody. I'm keeping it in, though, as a reminder. I don't edit things if they're foolish on my part, because I don't deserve to make myself look better than what I am. No, sorry, just kidding. But I am leaving it in, though. But I've even heard of people using septic tanks, just using the big metal tanks to store fresh water. But that's obviously not optional for everybody again. So, what are things that you should do? Well, first of all, you should have some level of water stored up. Best way to do this is have literally just a few gallons of distilled water stored up, literally, in your pantry. It's really nice to have anyway because, it takes a long time to go bad and it's very inexpensive. Another thing I recommend people looking into is those life straws. That is amazing. I remember when they first came out, I thought, if that really works, that is a game changer for developing countries, third world countries, hikers, and survivalists. And sure enough, it does work, and it's amazing. You see all these remarkable videos where people just filter some of the foulest things. So that's a really nice thing to just sort of have in your bug out bag, bug out bike, bug out car, whatever you have. And additionally, learning how, and I'm not going to be able to show you how in this video, unfortunately, I'm just not that good at filming things, but I'll try and actually include it as a PDF, though. There are ways that you can make sort of a water filtration device, and it's pretty MacGyver-y, but it really does work. Pretty much what you're doing is you're taking a big basin, like a big clay pot or a big metal pot or what have you, and you're putting on over top of that, you're putting layers of activated charcoal, sand, big stones. Basically what you're doing is from the top to the bottom it gets finer and finer, smaller and smaller. So those big rocks, they're filtering out big chunks of debris, sand, grit, etc., and so on and so forth, till you finally get to sand and then to activated charcoal if you can acquire it. And really what this is doing is it's just getting rid of everything that could potentially be a hazard in that water, excluding, and this is so important, excluding viruses and bacteria, because they are going to be too small even for that. So the second thing you do is you boil it. So after you filter it with this homemade filtration device, which is not crazy hard, a flippin' Boy Scout could do this, then you boil the water, and once it reaches, 200 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius, which you don't need a thermometer for, because thankfully that's one of those things that we can eyeball. Once it reaches a boiling temperature, that will mechanically destroy any pathogen that's going to mess you up. So the filtration takes care of non-pathogen problems, excluding a few, just a minor number of potential hazards that really aren't even worth getting into, because if they are an obstacle for you and you don't have any recourse, kind of screwed anyway. And then, of course, boiling gets rid of any pathogens. So that's sort of the double-ended approach. It's always important to do both, because if you don't boil it, you're going to get Giardia or something, aka beaver fever, aka kind of sort of like dysentery and horrible. And then if you boil it but you don't filter it, then you could also get other compounds like heavy metals, or a number of things really, that can ruin your day as well, or at the very least accumulate in your system over time. So those are all very valid ways of acquiring water. But more than anything, though, and I've mentioned it in previous episodes, I'm all about the whole becoming a yeoman, becoming a homesteader, acquiring land somewhere. And if that's the case, then finding a well, and that's something to look for if you're looking for rural properties, a water source, digging a well, or finding some means of acquiring water in a more long-term sense. Because boiling and filtering out of a river, it's handy in a pinch. It's handy in a situation where it's necessary. But planning ahead in advance to ensure that that doesn't rear its head in the first place is an even better strategy. So I think that covers everything with water. Oh, one quick one. Water disinfectants are pretty common and easy to find, and one of the cheapest and easiest to come by is just iodine. Iodine's a great way of disinfecting water. There are others out there, but that's just one thing you should also consider, because you can disinfect a lot of water with a little iodine. And push comes to shove, some people do the same thing by just watering down their water, diluting it more accurately, with whiskey or something. That's what the Mormons did when they went west. It's kind of funny to think about now, because they're very averse to alcohol, but originally it was like a requirement. So, yeah, that's about it, though. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.